The House of Grey, a podcast-only novel written by Collin Earl, read by Christopher Snellgrove. For more information about the book, please visit houseofgreybook.com. Music for The House of Grey provided by Figure of Fiends. Visit the band at myspace.com/Figure of Fiends. Cover art by James Thane. More information at THAYN.net. Hey folks, I'm Chris Snellgrove. Welcome back to Collin Earl's The House of Grey. This week we have some special guests, Nick Taylor and the cast of the podcast novel Lagon Awakening. Nick and his friends are going to catch us all up on what's been going on over at Collin University. Take it away, Nick.
From the mind of Nicholas Taylor comes an epic series that crosses land, sea, and air. Set in a world that is not our own, Lagon Awakening takes you through a journey in a land full of imagination and innovation. Join two people's fight for survival as they struggle against all odds to survive in a world filled with danger and opposition at every turn. Subscribe today at LagonBook or Podiabooks.com.
Whoa, that was really intense music.
Kyther, shut up. We're supposed to be introducing ourselves and doing this story so far thing for that Snellgrove guy. Come on, Lagon, be nice. Alright, guys, come on, we seriously need to do this.
I don't think this is a good idea, personally. I mean, look, we're just talking into this little white box.
Kyther, he said it was a computer. There's nothing to worry about it. We just read this little script here and, go for it.
Yeah, but how do you know there's not, magic in it? Is it gonna blow up or something?
Kyther, it's not magic, alright? He said it was a computer. That Snowgrove guy seems like a nice guy. Yeah, I don't think his name is Snowgrove. I think he said it was like Snailgrove or Snailgrove, something really weird.
No, I think it was Snowgrove. I mean, come on, Snailgrove's a really weird name.
Come on, we just need to do this.
You know what? I'm not doing it. You guys can die if you want to. I'm out of here.
Fine. Hi, my name is Lagon, and I'm here with my sister, Sasha. And we're here to read the story up to this point for the House of Grey book. So here's the story. It goes something like this. Monson had a really quiet first day. A new school, some new friends, a few new enemies, various strange people, and a weird-looking stone that's not even dinner time yet. It said, and it's not even dinner time yet. Don't you know how to read? Yes, I know how to read. Sorry, it's not even dinner time yet. He made it through orientation. Oh, be sure to tell him about that really, really mean dean. Made that really rude comment about how he looked. That couldn't have made him feel good. Oh yeah, and that really hot girl that he fell on. She has a name. Kylie Cormac. And she was really rude. Why would you think she's hot? Sometimes being that way is kind of hot. I mean, she's a good-looking girl. So what? If you're good-looking, you can be mean to the world?
Yeah, you kinda has a point here.
Shut up, Kyther. I thought you were leaving.
Sorry, I'm out of here.
I'm sorry about that. Anyway, now they're accompanying a skinny, rigid-looking man named Brian to Monson's Holrumveer apartment. He wonders what mysteries will hold for him now. So, there you have it. And this is Chapter 3. Sasha, seriously, sometimes I hate you. Yeah, well, you're adopted.
Brian helped Monson gather up his stuff, then led him down another highly ornate hallway, similar to the ones Monson had seen in the Colosseum, and leading in from the guest parking area. However, this hall was different. Instead of carved decorations and elaborate woodwork, this passage had finely detailed murals running its length. The painting portrayed an assortment of Roman military ventures, some historical and others obviously fictional. The murals, whether real or make-believe, displayed remarkable artistry. The soldiers and their commanders remained locked in eternal combat with hordes of barbarians and charlatans as the fury of the Roman war machine devastated lines of blurred figures in the background. The illustrations suited this hall well and felt like a culmination of ideas that described the school and the attitudes of a people long forgotten, suddenly reborn in the now. This mural was both Corinth and Rome personified in an epic artistic rendition. I have never liked these paintings. Brian looked at the murals with distaste. Really? Why is that? To be completely honest with you, I have never liked the whole Roman concept. Granted, it is not as if it originated with their society. There has always been such. Probably will continue to be. I'm not sure I quite understand. My dear young hero. What? He paused there. He looked like he was considering his words. Let me answer you in the form of a question. Were the Romans great? And if they were, what was it about the Romans that made them great? Monson stopped and looked into Brian's green-flecked eyes. Brian peered back, a pleasant expression on his face. Monson scrutinized him, trying to discern his possible meaning. He knew there was a specific answer that Brian was looking for, but had no idea what it was. Yes, Monson answered, acting more confident than he felt, but at the same time thinking he had come up with an indisputable fact that proves their greatness. Brian's face reflected a polite interest that plainly told him to go on. Monson obliged. I think you need to look at all the different things they were responsible for. I mean, if you think about it, there's hardly an area of science, philosophy, or religion that the Romans didn't have at least some influence over. Yes, that is very true. Brian gave him a wry smile. However, how were they able to accomplish all those great things? Monson paused for a moment, unsure of the question's meaning. Brian gave him an understanding smile. Let me ask you this. Do you think the people the Romans conquered thought they were great? Monson thought for a moment, but the answer was obvious. Probably not. Exactly. Brian looked amused. Yes, we have many great things from the Romans, but historians put them on par with God himself, blatantly ignoring that while their accomplishments were far-reaching, even everlasting, their crimes are just as, if not more, far-reaching and everlasting. Yeah, I guess I never really thought about it. He wondered idly how he missed something like that. For some reason, that concept seemed important. It certainly does make you think, does it not? One should always remember that there are two sides to every story. Brian gestured toward the wall. For me, it would make a vast difference in appearance if the artist just made a few minor differences in the picture. Like what? Monson looked at him curiously. For instance, Brian looked the length of the extensive hallway. What if the artist had been able to immortalize the innocent people that died in both battle and siege, the women and children that lost fathers, husbands, and brothers in the fury of pointless conflict, or the pain suffered by those who had lost all hope, faith, and will to live for a cause they neither knew nor understood? Now, that would be a picture worthy of admonition. Brian? What exactly do you do here? Oh, I apologize. Where are my manners? Brian chuckled slightly. I started monologuing. He adopted a slightly more formal tone, one that sounded a great deal like Mr. Gatt. My dear hero, I am thy manservant. I'm sorry. Monson paused for a moment, thinking he must have heard wrong. You're my what? Thy manservant. And what the bloody hell is that? Why did it seem that everyone at this school was reluctant to give him a straight answer? As Horamvir, you are given certain privileges and responsibilities. Brian adjusted the bags he was carrying for Monson. He smoothly pulled out a small bag and removed the blue card key, inserting it into a small slot by the door. I am at the same time a privilege and a responsibility. I am here to make sure that you fulfill all of your responsibilities and that you take full advantage of your privileges. Responsibilities? Monson grimaced. Like I don't have enough to worry about? My dear hero. Brian winked at him. One must always look on the bright side. Yes, you have many responsibilities, but the privileges are well worth it. In one fluid motion and a flick of a wrist, a great oak door, deeply stained and expertly carved, opened without a sound. Whoa! Was all that Monson uttered as he surveyed the room beyond the large oak door. He was dumbfounded. He hardly noticed the door as it blended in with the murals, let alone had the chance to think of what might be behind it. Now, looking around, it was unbelievable. It was obvious that the short entry hall right behind the door was a place of prominence, as it felt like a focal point of sorts. The murals along the inside of the room were some of the finest he had seen on campus. The entryway-like hall opened to a circular landing, where large light fixtures made the windowless hallway and landing incredibly bright. The hall ended in another ornate oak door. The door itself had a large inscription, totally in Latin, with the words chiseled out of gleaming white marble. These words screamed for recognition, while perfectly balancing the overtones of the dark wood on the door's frame. E pluribus unum? Like on a quarter. Yes, it's Latin. Out of many, one. I don't get it. Master Grey, did you not win your scholarship to this institution by winning the Knowledge Bowl? Which, if I am not mistaken, is a history-based competition? Shut up. Of course I knew what it meant. I was just seeing if you knew. Ah, I see. Very well then. Shall we? Brian slid through the open door and stepped aside. Monson noticed a large banner thrown across the length of the room with the phrase, Welcome Horum Monson Grey, emblazoned with gold and crimson lettering and a hint of glitter. Monson stepped across the threshold and marveled at the truly exquisite room. A handsome sitting area with large leather chairs and a sofa was before him, the furniture placed methodically around a large oak coffee table that appeared to be of the same make as the apartment door. Large floor lamps stood on either side of the chairs, and while they were imposing, they doused the area with mounds of soft light. Adjacent to the sitting area was a large wooden entertainment center, almost completely contained by shutters and cast into shadow from the glare of the floor lamps. At the most outer edges of the sitting room, to both the left and to the right, there were more of the large oak doors that remained closed. On the other side of the room, a double-wide window covered by a shade of horizontal slats sat between the two doors and gave a wonderful view to the outside. The room's decor had a very earthy feel to it, decorated with crimson and varying colors of deep brown and green. The room was not only aesthetically engaging, but also very soothing on the senses. Monson felt both pleased and impressed by the room and the atmosphere it created. Welcome to your quarters. Brian set Monson's bags down and walked over to the double-wide window. He touched a screen next to the window and the shades retracted up with a flourish. When finished, Monson watched as Brian's foot searched for something. Suddenly, the floor lamps went out. Out the window, Monson caught a fleeting glimpse of the large woods that marked the border of one of the many national forests of Washington State, just before Brian stepped forward, placing himself in Monson's line of vision. Brian gave him a warm smile, which Monson returned pleasantly. Then, Brian gestured, as if to say, well, go check it out. Monson was too happy to oblige. He started to explore, stopping periodically when he found something of interest. He noticed that besides the sitting space, which could easily be used for entertaining, There was a wet bar, complete with refrigerator and an assortment of other labor-saving appliances. Upon closer inspection, the wet bar was more akin to a small kitchen area, and although it was not very large, it appeared to be fairly well equipped. He noticed a control panel with commands like lights, music, and movies that he suspected was a voice-activated remote control, as there were no buttons, only a large speaker located in the very center of the panel. He stared around the apartment with wonderment, at a complete loss for words. Suddenly, an idea came to him. "Hey, Brian, what can you tell me about this position that I have?" He walked to one of the plush leather chairs and sat down, looking at Brian intently. "I mean, I went from winning a scholarship to attend a school, a good school, sure, but just a school nonetheless, to a rock star. You said I had responsibilities. What exactly are they expecting of me?" "My dear hero." Brian nodded his head, which was probably a substitution for a bow. "I would be delighted to enlighten you. However, not right now. You still have many a thing to do. You need something to eat, and you should rest." He stopped and turned to Monson, then continued, "Though, I am curious. Why did you not read the information packet you were sent after you won the Knowledge Bowl?" Monson flushed. He really did not want to talk about that. "It's a long story." Monson bowed his head slightly to hide his face. Brian must have noticed this less-than-stellar reaction, as he did not pursue the subject. Rather, he motioned for Monson to follow him. He walked to the left side of the room, to one of the sets of double-wide oak doors, and with a flick of his wrist he opened them to reveal Monson's bedroom. And what a bedroom it was! It was spacious, but not ostentatiously so. The same earthy tones from the sitting room decorated the walls, and it had that old Victorian feel, similar to those old buildings Monson had seen on campus. There was another doorway to the left of the bed that he could only assume was a bathroom. To the right, there was a large window that opened to another view of the forest. In the very center of the room sat a large 4-poster bed, carved of redwood, complete with hangings. A nightstand stood next to it. The whole scene had an accumulative effect on Monson's sense of foreboding. What kind of lives were these people living that they could offer such wealth to a nobody like him? They gave him a servant. A servant! What in the world was he going to do with a servant? His trepidation notwithstanding, he still could not help being impressed by the quarters, and by Brian, who was one of the amazingly refined. Brian walked to the 4-poster bed, placed his hands on the curtains and pulled them apart. A very comfortable-looking down comforter and a large quantity of pillows came sharply into view. When Monson saw this, he lost it. His self-control just went out the window. With one inquisitive look to Brian and no preamble, he took off bounding towards the bed as fast as he could. As he neared it, he threw himself spinning in mid-air, landing on his back in the dead center of the bed. He kicked off his shoes as he started to sink into the mattress. Brian gave a smile and an appreciative chuckle. "You and I are going to get along just fine, I think. I will go prepare something for you to eat, and then allow you a bit of rest." "Rest? Like sleep? Now? Isn't there something I should be attending or meeting teachers or something?" "Most of the other students are getting to know their roommates right now. There is about an hour allocated to this portion of the orientation. You may go and introduce yourself to the various floor captains if you wish." No, that's all right." Monson ignored the fact that he had no idea what a floor captain was. "You look tired. Relax for a moment, and I will bring you something to eat." Monson relented, acknowledging Brian with a slight nod. Brian, in return, gave a slight bow and left, closing the great double doors behind him. What a nice, weird man, Monson thought to himself. Between Brian and Mr. Gatt, he was certainly not going to run out of adults to be curious about. Adults, thought Monson. he found that he suddenly missed Molly. He indulged in a back-breaking stretch and thought he would take Brian's advice and rest for a while. His body and mind were tired from the excitement of the day. A short snooze would do him some good. He slowly started to move himself to the top of the bed, to pull down the covers tucked far underneath the headboard. As he started to pull the blankets, his thoughts started to wander towards Kylie and her little tirade. He felt apprehensive about her, but could not place the source of his apprehension. He found, however, that the more he thought about it, the more it annoyed him. He wondered if that type of behavior was normal for girls. He really hoped not. A verbal lashing like that one was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and not one he would readily repeat. He looked at the uncovered bed. Suddenly, he did not want to sleep, but thought he would check out the rest of his apartment. He walked to the closed double doors, opened them, and stepped lightly towards the room on the right side of the apartment. He scanned the room as he went, but Brian was nowhere in sight. He opened the second set of double doors and stepped through them. This room revealed a handsome office space complete with a large computer desk, made of the same deeply stained wood as the other home furnishings. A couch and an armchair sat to either side of a huge bookshelf that reached from the floor to the top of the ceiling. He went to a chair sitting in front of the desk. He sat for a moment, then, finding it very comfortable, allowed himself to sink deeper into it. Now sitting slightly reclined in the chair, he noticed a rippled shade that hid the interior of the desk's large workspace. He reached and after a moment found a small button under the lip of the desktop. He pushed it, and the shade unlocked and reclined with a single clink. To Monson's delight, a very expensive-looking computer was behind the shade, complete with scanner, high-definition flat screen, and laser printer. He smiled appreciatively as he slid the shade back into place, hearing the lock click. He stood up, his attention wandering toward the large shelves of books along the wall. Before the attack, he read. A lot. That was one thing that his grandfather made clear to him. Reading was important. He remembered his grandfather reminding him to never stop learning. It was odd that of all things, he actually remembered this. But he did remember it, and with surprising clarity. Words are power, and reading is the key to unlocking that power. That, along with developing skills of reason. In his current state, Monson could not recall why that was so important to his grandfather. He just knew it was. Many details like this, both minor and major, came back to him slowly. Learning about yourself might seem scary, but the fact that he could not remember much of his past was a bit on the exciting side, as freakish as that sounds. Truly, memories would come and it would feel like he was reliving life experiences all over again. It was a funny sensation whenever a memory, regardless of its nature, resurfaced. It was almost as if he was renewing himself, constantly reviving. While this was disconcerting at times, it was much better than the gaping void that currently existed within him. Monson scanned over the books and smiled as he saw that the titles were in alphabetical order. He guessed that Brian probably maintained that order of the books. He seemed like the type who would. A few of them caught his eye with interesting titles or bold-looking covers. He inspected a few closer. He was always looking for something to read, and here was a perfect place to find it. Most of the books were histories that were militaristic in nature. Some were accounts of modern conflicts, such as the Persian Gulf Wars, Vietnam, Korea, World War I and II, and the Civil War. Most, however, were historic accounts of ancient battles. The Roman Empire and their epic accounts lay recorded in the many different volumes. One large series of books seemed to outline their history from the formation of the Roman Republic to the fall of the Byzantine Empire, and everything in between. Monson was relieved to see that despite the school's obsession with old Rome, there were many books dedicated to other empires, Egyptian, Persian, Syrian, and others. He idled around the shelves for a bit longer, hoping to find something that might entertain him during his off nights. It was in that moment that something on the back center bookcase drew his attention like a magnet. Lore of the Folk, A Complete Guide to Your Understanding of Collin County, read the title. Curious, Monson pulled the book off the shelf and examined the outer cover. It looked like a tour guide of sorts. A painting of a rock-laced waterfall dominated the front cover. It was very beautiful, almost like a picture or photo. He traced his finger along the right side of the picture. He wondered if these falls were actually in the valley, or if this was just some artistic flavoring meant to make Collin County more interesting than it really was. He flipped open the cover to look for something resembling a dedication or author's note. In place of where those things should have been were 3 handwritten words, "For Rosemary." Monson glanced at the other books and the epic history that they represented. He looked back at the book in his hand. "Well, you seem out of place here, don't you?" said Monson aloud, even though he was the only one in the room. "What about this valley could be so interesting that someone would want to write a history of it?" "Master Grey?" A voice split the air from the other room. It was Brian. Yeah, Brian, I'm in here." Monson quickly closed the book. He hesitated for a moment, and without really thinking, he tucked the book under his arm and left the room, closing the double doors behind him. Brian was standing behind the counter of the kitchenette, holding a tray with an assortment of different food. "I was not aware of your preference, so I brought you a little bit of everything." He set the tray on the counter. He turned his back for a moment and turned around, bringing up a few different soft drinks. Brian indicated for Monson to choose, and he grabbed for a can at the same time, placing the book on the stool beside him. He cracked open the can and started to drink. "I don't usually drink a lot of pop." Monson took a sip of the blue canned cola. It was a bit sweet, but he found that he liked it. Setting down the soda, he picked up a ham and cheese bagel sandwich and bit into it. It was simple, but very tasty. What teenager does not drink soft drinks? Brian leaned over the plate of food, but did not take any himself. Monson, noticing this, grabbed another sandwich and placed it in front of Brian. He looked startled. "You look hungry." Monson gestured towards the food. "Why don't you join me? Besides, we're probably going to be spending quite a bit of time together, so we might as well be friends, right?" Brian studied Monson for a moment with soft, unassuming eyes. He smiled gently and picked up the sandwich. "Thank you." He took a bite. "Returning to the soft drinks, I am curious. Why do you not drink them? Are you an athlete?" Monson laughed. "No, I've never done any type of sports as far as I know. I was homeschooled, so, that makes it hard." "You were homeschooled, were you? Why stop now, and in such a dramatic way? Did homeschool not suit your taste?" Monson did not answer, but stuffed the rest of the sandwich into his mouth, almost choking as he did. Finally, he was able to swallow. "I think I'm going to go lay down now." "I see." Brian straightened up and gave Monson another one of those little bows. "Very well, hero. I will wake you when the time is right. Rest assured, knowing I will be here, and thank you again for the sandwich." Monson touched his fingers to his brow in a kind of half-salute as a sign of thanks, and proceeded in his room, closing the doors behind him. Alone now, he walked across his room and sat on the large windowsill that ran the length of the huge window. It had started to rain, a gentle patter of drumming drops stuck to the glass repeatedly as the water's remnants drizzled down the length of the window. The sight and sounds were very soothing. He stared out to the forest marking the end of Collin's property. After lingering on the forest in the rain for a moment, he thought of Brian involuntarily and looked over his shoulder. He sighed. He was short with Brian, and he knew it. Brian did not know anything about his past. No one did, and it was not fair for him to react and treat someone like that, especially when Brian had no idea as to why. He would have to apologize and explain. That was the only way to clear up the misunderstanding. Monson did not need to give him a full account, just enough to understand the cause of his rudeness. With that resolve firmly in mind, he thought he would lie down, even for just a little while. Sleeping poorly became second nature to him after waking up in the hospital. Not sleeping, especially when he was tired, irritated him a great deal. It made life difficult for him on a day-to-day basis, as he always felt tired and dull-minded. He lied down on the turned-down bed and felt himself sink into the folds of the covers. He stretched his arms and legs, tightening the muscles as far as they could go. He winced as he felt the strain of scarred skin that covered a large part of his body. One more reminder of what I can't remember. He was determined to finish his stretch. Not letting his body overcome his mind felt important. To gain some leverage, he slid his hands toward the space between the headboard and mattress, hoping to find an edge or lip that he could grab onto. He could not find any, as the headboard seemed solid with no end from top to bottom. Annoyed at being unable to finish his stretch, he started to move his fingers farther down the headboard, searching for something to hold on to. He stopped when his hand slid over a strange indentation. His fingers lingered on the spot a moment. To the touch, it did not feel like it was part of the initial design. It felt too random and raw. He struggled for a moment, curious as to why there would be such distinct marks on a fine hardwood bed frame. How odd, he thought to himself, as he considered this for a moment, trying to determine what might have caused such marks. Could the bed be from a used furniture store? Monson stifled a laugh, but realized that he did not need to. He was the only one privy to the thought. What a ridiculous thought it was. There was no way that would happen. All the same, he did his best to envision Dean Dayton shopping at an ARC or Goodwill. That, in of itself, was enough to make him laugh out loud. He continued running his fingers over the distinct indentations. He realized that the indentation ran at least part of the length of the bottom portion of the bed. It was finely cut, and despite its out-of-place location, was fairly deep. Screw this, thought Monson, extracting his arm from the space between the bed and headboard. He slid with a dull thump to the side of the bed and started to pick up the mattress, intending to tear it off. The mattress, however, was heavier than he had expected, and he strained for just a moment. With a final thrust of exertion, the mattress slid partially to the side and exposed a heart chiseled into the wood with a set of initials in the center. Monson laughed aloud, holding nothing in reserve. How anticlimactic! All that foreboding and excitement for some childish declaration of puppy love. How annoying. The two probably weren't even together still. He took a closer look at the initials, still chuckling to himself. G, D, P, and M, P. Monson wondered who in the world would do something that cheesy. He grabbed the mattress and started to heave it back into position. Heavy little sucker, aren't ya? He scowled as he realized what just occurred. Talking to himself. Brilliant. People were just gonna love that. Monson sighed again. The habit of talking to himself developed a long time ago, probably a byproduct of being alone quite a bit. Gleaned from one of his many journals, Monson was surprised at this little detail of his life, but also found that he immediately fell into the habit once he had read this. From the same passage, he found out his grandfather raised him and they lived out in the middle of nowhere. From what he read, speaking to himself had not posed much of a problem. If you did not talk to yourself, you could go some time without speaking. As such, it remained an important thing to do, even just to stay in practice. Now, in his current surroundings, well, that was a different story. He was around people, a lot of people. It was probably a habit he should attempt to break. He was already an enigma, and people were probably going to think he was weird, crazy, or at least very frazzled. Why give them any more to work with? He struggled for a few moments more and finally shoved the mattress in place. Unfortunately, he was not paying attention to his footing. He fell to the ground, kicking the frame in the bed just hard enough to move it slightly. He hit the ground with a solid thump. He slid lightly across the floor like a hockey puck when a second thump broke the silence. He lay on the ground for a moment. Brilliant, Grey, just brilliant, he thought to himself. It was then that the second sound finally registered. What was that thump? He crawled and forced his way under the bed to investigate. He pulled out a small tin container. The container appeared totally unremarkable, and the tin looked tarnished and faded, probably from many years of use. He tried the lid, but it would not budge. Annoyed, he almost tossed the small tin aside. Honestly, why on earth would this be wedged up behind his bed? He could not think of anything more stupid. There was not a single reason for it to be there, unless someone was trying to hide it. He paused and looked at the container. This could be something private and important, forgotten by the previous resident. Then again, it really could not be that important. If it was, why leave it? Especially in a place that was obviously more for convenience than actual concealment. There could not be any harm in just looking. They did leave it after all. He decided no, there would not be any harm, and slowly wedged the lid off the container. Paper and envelopes of every shape, size, and color came spilling out, along with what Monson could only assume was accumulated grime. How long had this thing been in here to have this much dust? A sweet scent permeated the air as remains of perfume wafted over him. A girl wrote these notes. It was so obvious it was almost painful. No boy would douse his letters with perfume. The handwriting, or what could be seen of it through the dust, was large and loopy and too feminine to be a boy's. He grabbed one of the papers and opened it. He read the title written in the same loopy handwriting. Paths of Power, The Heart's Song by M.P. If sight could speak, what would it say? Would it speak of amber rays or love's blossoming song? Or would it recite tales of hardship and pain within the lover's throng? If colors could become the heart's refraction, what would they say in its action? Red for passion and anger's heat, blue for meek souls that are ever upbeat, yellow for freedom, the expressive self, green for the solid being, the foundation for all else. Monson stopped reading. What in the world is this? He thought. He unfolded the paper. It went on for at least 2 more pages. This was supposed to be a love letter? Well, it did not seem like a very good one. What happened to the "How do I love thee, let me count the ways"? Maybe this meant more to someone else, but this abstracted gibberish was lost on a person like him. He thought too literal for the symbolic world of expression. Not that he did not appreciate art, not by a long shot. He liked art. He liked it a great deal. He just liked things that were more straightforward, more black and white. He folded the poem and placed it back in the pile. He fixed the stack, making sure it would fit back into the tin, and grabbed the lid when he noticed a second piece of paper bound with some string. It was heavier than the first, which made him think about the length of this poem or letter. He felt it, running his fingers across its length. Something seemed different. This could not be paper. It was too heavy of grain. It felt more like parchment. Intrigued, he untied the string and slid it off in one motion. Words of the cursed. These lands, I know their secret. These lands, I know their past. These lands, I know their folly and tragedies forecast. Come and claim the spoils of creation's grand mistake. Yet beware hell's army and heaven's fiery gate. Now that is just weird. Do girls really write stuff like this? How confusing. Maybe having a girlfriend was not all it's cracked up to be. He placed the poem and properly stacked the mismatched groups of paper. After grabbing the container and lid, he placed the stack back into it and returned it to its hiding place under his bed. When he was finished, he laid back down, recounting the events of the day. Day? It wasn't even 3 yet. He sighed, feeling the tiredness creep through him. Between almost being clubbed by Artorius, knocking the crap out of one of the prettiest girls Monson had ever seen, the weird silver stone hanging around his neck, and oh, let's not forget the weird out-of-body experience or whatever the hell that was. He felt that he had experienced enough for one day. Hopefully, this was not going to be a daily occurrence. "I've only been here a few hours," remarked Monson, again out loud. "Weird things are already starting to happen." He thought of Molly and her goofy, high-pitched laugh. Always excited, always optimistic. He then thought of the gift, her odd presentation, her unsure smile, and her tears. What was with those tears? Well, whatever it was, let it be for now. It could wait until later. With that final thought, Monson Grey drifted off to sleep. Which was unfortunate, because if he had been awake just a bit longer, he might have noticed the faint grayish flicker pulsating from under his shirt and a strange dark streak appearing on his wrist.
Images played at the edge of his consciousness, creating a webbed but disjointed slideshow. Scenes seemed connected but confused, like someone tipped a storyboard and jumbled the pictures, disjointing the order and twisting the timeline. Screeching tires and breaking glass permeated the air as gobs of liquid fire enveloped them, searing their bodies and confusing their senses. Screams in a forgotten language joined the throngs of pain-filled moaning as his body lashed back and forth, and vertigo overtook him. As quickly as it started, it stopped. The scene changed, or maybe it just became clear. The vision of a man wearing a cloak came into focus. He walked forward, holding something in his hand. An object came into view, an object that seemed solid but at the same time wavered with pulsing energy. Hatred, so intense it almost took a physical form, radiated from him as he moved closer to where a second man lay, panting. The second seemed defeated. He lay battered, bloody, and bruised. The cloaked man grinned while purpose shone in his movements, and evil, pure evil, surrounded his aura. The cloaked man moved on, but it seemed to take a long time for him to move close to where the second man lay. It was as if he fought an invisible force impeding his progress. As the second man lay there, repulsion seeped in, emboldening him to move. He did so, but being too weak, he merely stumbled back to the ground. The man with the cloak came closer, calmly walking, moving closer and closer. His cruel eyes radiated under the dark cloak, as finally the shadow of his face appeared. A face that struck pure fear peered out from the darkness of the hood, as his countenance was both lit up and thrown into relief by the light from the object positioned aggressively in his hand. A wicked smile played across his cruel lips as he glared. He raised his hand to strike.
Monson awoke with a start, breathing heavy and feeling slightly feverish. The closed curtains gave the room a dark cast and made it impossible to tell the time of day. He reached up, placing his hand on his forehead, and felt cold beads of sweat upon his brow. How long had he been asleep? It could not have been long. He looked around the room. There was no way of telling because of the curtains, and he did not have a watch on. He noticed a pitcher of water sitting on the bedside nightstand. He stood up, retrieved the pitcher and poured the water into a glass, downing it in 2 great gulps. "And people wonder why I always look so tired," thought Monson wryly. He climbed back into bed and stared at the canopy above him. Strange images flashed across his vision as realization came. A dream, yet another he could barely remember. He closed his eyes, trying to grasp and decipher what he saw. Pain. Screaming. Distinct. Familiar. Damn familiar. Everything is damn familiar. Monson opened his eyes, slapping his bed in frustration. He dreamt of something very important. Now he could not remember the dream or why it was important. Was it a repressed memory or a piece of the past? Why? Why could he not remember? Monson felt like tearing his hair out, if only to give him something else to ponder. This dream or nightmare was different. A new dream from a new avenue of his mind. He felt that, but he did not know what to do to latch on to these dreams. He probably never would. This thought made Monson wonder about his past self. A single moment wiped out the person known as Monson Grey, and now lying on this bed, a shadow of that person, that fictional being, wrestled with his own fears and the realities of his life. When he looked in the mirror, he did not recognize the face looking back at him. Who would have thought that would be so scary? He rolled onto his stomach. What am I left with? I mean, where do I go from here? Will these dreams ever make sense? He asked in his head. He amused himself for a moment by picturing himself as someone famous and popular. In this vision, all of his dreams came true. He paused. My dreams? What dreams? He wondered what his dreams were like before the attack took everything from him. Were there dreams he would remember? Were they full of happy thoughts and silly desires? Did they reflect his heart, his wishes, his humanity? Humanity, he thought. He scowled to himself. His voice started again in his head. What humanity? What is humanity even? Does having dreams and ambitions make up your humanity? Or was it something else? Something like fear. Well, what was there to fear? Monson did not know. However, he did know that it was his fear that made him feel truly alive, but at the same time totally apart from everyone else. He let out a long yawn, exhaling the air, and with it, these difficult subjects. What's with all these depressing thoughts? Just be thankful you're alive. A lot of people aren't. You were spared. You were lucky, he thought. That's right, he said out loud. He looked for something else to occupy the time. Maybe I'll do some reading. After a brief moment or two of looking, Monson found his backpack right inside the door to his room. He assumed that Brian put it there as he did not remember doing it himself. He started to dig through his bag, then finding what he was looking for, pulled out a small leather-bound book, his journal. In his current state of memory loss, the only thing he could depend on was his journals. These precious histories, of which there were volumes, were his one link to his past, his one comfort, and a comfort they were. Molly had brought these to his attention shortly after he awoke in the hospital. Those were some of his toughest days, the ones right after he broke from his comatose state. He awoke, knowing so little, looking at foreign people in a foreign place. Molly came to his side. That was a moment he would never forget. He remembered the touch of Molly's hand as she asked how he was doing. He remembered the look on her face when he asked, "Who are you?" He remembered her scanning his frame, and the rich detail of her tear-filled eyes as she took in his scarred and torn body. Monson felt the rims of his own eyes. Tears? He dabbed at the corners of his eyes. Hope for understanding and recovery did come, however. Molly made sure of that. That day, 1 week after he awoke, another day that he will never forget, Molly brought him the leather-bound books that gave him insight, that gave him hope, that in time would give him understanding. These journals, these histories, were like a pillar of light. They gave Monson that extra push, that extra edge he needed to work through life. However, they too were not without their frustrations. Monson's younger self lacked consistency in his writing. The journals had large sections with nothing written in them. Oddly enough, it looked like he had still skipped these pages, as if written in invisible ink or something. Large parts of his life were missing. Not that he could complain. The mere fact that he had these records were amazing, and despite his initial frustration, these journals brought great comfort in tough times. Many memories came flooding back to him as he read the words written by his childhood self. With this knowledge, he became stronger in body and mind, but knew he was far from complete, far from normal. It made him wonder if he would ever be. He took a moment. Normal? He said to himself. What is normal? Still to this day, he possessed no concept of that word. No matter how much time passed, the idea remained something beyond his reach. Monson chuckled as he thought about the whole ordeal. Collin, Barty Bridge, his grandfather, all of those people. He stopped laughing, ashamed of his actions. These were not laughing matters, but he tended to deal with pain or stress with humor. That probably was not the best idea, but go with what works was his philosophy. What could he say? This worked for him. He adjusted his body, trying to find a more comfortable position. It felt drained, weak, and tired. Always tired. But he was uncomfortable. So very uncomfortable. He stood up and again headed towards the window seat. He sat down. The cushion was very soft. Made of an odd material, it was as if the cushion had water sewn directly into it. He adjusted himself. It really did feel good. He moved the blackout shade to reveal soft, gloomy gray light as storm clouds congregated above Collin Valley. He leaned against the window, hoping his unpleasant thoughts would drain from him, just as the water drops drained from the side of the building. Suddenly, Monson sat bolt upright, regret threatening to overcome him. How could he forget something that important? No wonder he was having nightmares. He jumped down from the windowsill and ran to the double-wide doors, intending to correct his mistake. He threw the doors open with gusto, searching for his luggage. He scanned the room and found the bags propped carefully against the opposite wall besides the other set of double-wide doors. Running over to them, he started tearing at them with a frenzy, opening bags and sealed packages alike in his desperate attempt to find it. With a sigh of relief, he found it. A small, dark rag covered an old wooden frame. It was guarded with such care that although it was obvious the frame was old, the dark wood gleamed brilliantly, displaying neither scratch nor blemish. Sorrow assaulted Monson without mercy as he almost tore through the covering. A picture of a man stood smiling in the frame. His gray hair was messy and unkempt, and fell into soft, kind eyes that sparkled with both poise and experience. Monson smiled to himself and cradled the picture as feelings of contentment welled up inside him. He walked to his bed and placed the picture frame on the bedside table with tender affection. He took one last look at the photo before crawling back into bed. So much had happened to him in the last few months, and now he was in a strange place with strange people. He felt overwhelmed and alone. Very alone. "I'm so sorry," thought Monson as he lay in his bed. "I won't forget again, I promise." Then, as sleep again enveloped him, he muffled a simple goodnight to the picture frame. He knew that he would sleep better this time, because his grandpa was looking over him. What the hell is that? Monson thought. He groaned sleepily, still under a copious amount of covers. He heard it again. It grew louder. The sound, it felt something is here, right on top of him. Ah, crap, thought Monson. Now he knew what the boom was. He pulled the comforter off his head and caught a fleeting glimpse of Artorius leaning on the big oak double doors, a look of great amusement on his face. Before Monson could say anything, however, a sharp pain erupted on his chest. Casey's high-flying form crumpled into him. "Time to get up, hero!" Casey dug the elbow further into Monson's chest, knocking the wind out of him. "Dude, you slept long enough, man." It took Monson a minute to shove Casey off and inhale enough air to answer. "What time is it?" Monson tried to rub the tiredness out of his eyes. 5:30, bro. You see, you gone and spoiled it now." Casey grinned. "You aren't going to sleep tonight, and you're going to be extra tired for class tomorrow." Speaking of which, Monson suddenly thought of something. "When do we get our course schedules?" "Tomorrow morning, bro." Casey propped himself up on an elbow next to Monson. "Though 4 of our classes are already chosen for us." His face soured slightly. "Comes with the territory, I guess." At that exact moment, there was a loud rumble. All 3 boys jumped and looked around inquisitively. They started laughing when they realized it was Monson's stomach. "Dude, when was the last time you ate, bro? You sound like you're dying." "It's been a couple days since I've eaten properly, I guess. I was just too nervous to keep anything down." "Well, that settles it, doesn't it? We need to find this boy some food." "It's about that time anyway." Casey checked his watch. "Or, we wouldn't have even bothered you." He grinned deviously, seeing how Monson would react to his banter. "Really?" Monson's eyes narrowed as he cottoned on. "Hey, Case, how's Kylie? As I recall, you have a story to tell us." Then, looking at Artorius, he added, "Well, you have a story to tell me, at least." Casey blanched and tried to reply, but appeared to be at a loss for words. "Oh," Monson cooed in a mock voice of sweet consideration. "You're embarrassed. How sweet." Casey flushed a deep crimson, and Artorius laughed. Instead of answering, Casey slid off the bed and started to move towards the door. Monson laughed and threw a fist into the air. "It looks like that's one for me, Cassius." Casey suddenly stopped as if he was contemplating something. Then, abruptly, "Aw, screw that." He unexpectedly whipped around and ran, jumping at the last second. Monson watched in horror as Casey sailed towards him. He heard a token sliver of laughter as Casey landed right on top of him. Again. "All right, hero, let's see what you got." You've been listening to the podcast-only novel of The House of Grey by Collin Earl. For more news, information, and updates, please visit houseofgreybook.com. Music by Figure of Fiends. Visit the band at myspace.com/Figure of Fiends. Cover art for The House of Grey provided by James Thane. More information at THAYN.net.